Here to talk about the 5-part FX docuseries, A Wilderness of Error, I'd like to welcome Emmy Award-winning producer Marc Smerling to Sidewalks Entertainment. Hi Marc, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we talk about A Wilderness of Error, I'd like to talk a little bit about your earlier work. Now, what started your career in TV and filmmaking?
Well, I guess I started out as a newspaper reporter, and then I decided to go to film school. And one of the reasons I decided to go to film school is because of The Thin Blue Line, the movie that Errol Morris made.
Now, you're mostly known for your work in documentaries. Now, why documentaries?
Well, I think that reality is stranger than fiction for me. I find it much more interesting, although there's great fiction out there. Reality seems to always trump, you can never predict what people are going to do. And I think that's also why I ended up in crime, because crime is sort of the distillation of reality for most people. Everybody doesn't experience crime. Crime is sort of the concentrated version of the human experience.
Now, the FX true crime 5-part docuseries, A Wilderness of Error. Now, tell me a little bit about this docuseries.
It's about Jeffrey McDonald, who was a Green Beret doctor. He was 26 years old, stationed at Fort Bragg. And, one night, he says a band of hippies came into his home and brutally murdered his family. He had a stab wound in his chest, and he was taken to the hospital. Very quickly, the Army started to suspect that he had murdered his family. They had an investigative hearing, and there was a lot of accusations thrown back and forth, but eventually the Army set Jeffrey free. 9 years later, he was tried in a federal court, and he was found guilty of all 3 murders. He's still in prison, and he still professes his innocence.
Now, I'm not completely familiar with this case. Now, has this case been opened and closed again? Or, it sounds like it's an ongoing investigation.
Well, it's certainly ongoing in the world of storytelling. His case, which was in 1979, where he was found guilty of the 3 murders, has been appealed multiple times. And he's actually had a 2012 evidentiary hearing where they looked at a lot of the evidence that his defense team had discovered, and it didn't rise to a level where the court released him. He's still in prison. So, there's been a lot of contested, there's been a lot of back and forth in the media and in storytelling about his innocence and guilt. But from the court standpoint, he is a triple murderer.
Now, when creating true crime documentaries such as this one, how do you approach the content objectively without becoming emotionally invested?
Well, emotional investment comes in the form of, dealing with people who have been through trauma, who have suffered greatly because crime is extreme, and this is an extreme crime. And, the family of Colette, which was Jeffrey's wife, who was murdered, and, obviously their nephews and nieces and grandchildren. It's difficult to deal with those people in the sense that, they don't necessarily want to talk about it. They put it behind them. But, ultimately, in this story, I think everybody wanted clarity. So I could at least promise them that I would do the work. That means going back and talking to everybody who's available to talk, reinvestigating by reading all the court documents, and certainly reading the police files and anything I could find, and trying to build a chronology of events in a way that made sense, and to try to be truthful as possible.
What was your experience like creating this series?
It was anxiety provoking. I was working off Errol Morris's book, so, it was, and Errol Morris is the dean of the bar of what I'm doing in my life. So, it was hard. It was, this more than any other crime I've worked on has a lot of people invested in it. And that doesn't just include people who actually are connected to the crime. There are people out there who have adopted this crime as their sort of true crime addiction. And, so dealing with with it was it was a roller coaster, because you really want to get it right. You really want to do the work. You really want to figure it out. And if you can figure it out, hopefully, you won't get pummeled by all the true crime fans out there.
Because of COVID, filming has become limited, or I mean, if there is any filming taking place right now at all. Now, do you have any plans for any new projects once things open up again?
Yeah, yeah, we're actually trying to figure all this out, because you can still do a lot of what we do without having to travel or have a lot of people on set. So interviews can be done remotely, and editing can be done remotely. And a lot of thinking can be done remotely. So we're getting there.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lori and Mark. You can watch A Wilderness of Error on FX, and it streams on FX on Hulu. For more full-length celebrity interviews, visit sidewalkstv.com.